What's up, everybody? Welcome to Fourth and Goal, your weekly injury expert show. We are here, like Dave, we mentioned it last week. We are not here for hot takes. We're here to keep everyone's team healthy. So let's get going. How are you doing? What was your biggest takeaway from week one, preseason?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest takeaway that I found was there was no real huge significant like season-ending injury other than a couple like backups that we're going to get into. But overall, I mean, the play was kind of what you expected, no significant injuries, but it is week two of the preseason. The injury list is already, stacking up here. So, we're going to go through some of the biggest offensive injury headlines and tell you what you need to know.
Yeah. And like we mentioned last week, do not panic about any injury reports during training camp. It's bound to happen. But at this show, we'll cover everything you need to know in terms of major injury impact, not like small niggles here and there. So, Dave, let's start with a couple of non-injury injuries with our clickbait team, Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb had this gaff on the sideline, which is hilarious. But I don't care how strong somebody is. If somebody is hit in the back, like blindsided that way, suppose some kind of impact, right? Like he should feel like sore the next day or at least a couple of days after.
100%. I mean, I would expect him to be sore probably for at least a week. I mean, if you saw it in slow-mo, that impact was pretty significant. I mean, his back arched like complete like hyperextension. I mean, my back was kind of aching just seeing that happen. As the ref runs into him, long term, he's probably going to be fine, but he's definitely going to be dealing with some type of soreness, but nothing to worry about. It was just a hilarious moment
It
that you could
was
just watch on a loop continuously.
it's kind of like a reverse chiropractic session out there.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
And the funny part, he's going to get fined on top of that, so it's hilarious. And the other cowboy, Micah Parsons, I know he's a defensive player. Back stiffness, aka contract stiffness, I presume. Nothing to worry about there.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned about this. I mean, this seems like a classic hold-in situation, which is what players do nowadays. Instead of getting fined like $50,000 a day, it's better to just report and then not practice. James Cook was doing it until he just, got paid. But Micah Parsons is kind of milking this quote unquote back injury. So that's going to linger, like you said, until he gets that new contract. So big Cowboys players, CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons, don't be concerned. But Micah Parsons, I mean, at this point, I don't think he'll be available for the opener against my Eagles unless, a contract gets done like this week. But we'll see.
The question, I know like all the players like Micah Parsons, if they claim it's a back pain or whatever it is, but the team doctor clears them, like how do they navigate that situation?
That's always tough because you have something that the doctor and the team can see versus what the player is reporting as a symptom. A symptom is objective, so the player might
Mhm.
just say, "Hey, I'm having back pain," but I'm sure they've done imaging and everything and says, "Hey, there's nothing wrong with your back." We're not like saying that you don't have back pain, but it's one of those things where the player is saying, "Hey, I'm in pain. I'm not good enough to practice right now." So the team just kind of has to take the player's word for it. So they're kind of, a little limited in that sense. But you just got to take the player's word for what it's at.
Okay. Okay, let's get into it. By the way, guys, do check out the injuryexperts.com. We do a weekly injury show like this. Plus, we update our injury list every day. And Dr. Morse drops a video pretty much once or twice a day, and it's going to keep the frequency will increase as we get closer to the season. We have a draft guide available, and you can subscribe to our premium subscription, which is $4.99 a month during the season, and we'll cover everything injury you need to know. And myself, Rahul, and Davis are super awesome physical therapists on our team. And let's jump into our quarterbacks. A couple of big names. Matt Stafford, of course. I think it's been lingering for a couple of weeks. We covered it a little bit last week, but looks like he's going through some alternate therapy sessions, like red light therapy or something like that. Is that going to help him? I still feel like he's going to be limited throughout the season. I don't expect the usual Matt Stafford.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they're trying these alternative therapies, like red light therapy, like you said, Dr. Morse had a big tweet and video about it. It's one of those things that shows me that, hey, we're going to pull out all the stops. That tells me that they've tried classic rehab, PT, core strengthening, but it hasn't really completely gotten rid of the pain. So that tells me that, hey, we're going to continue to do everything that we can do. But like you said, it's likely going to be a season-long management issue. And you think about all the times a quarterback has to throw, that's a lot of torque on the spine. So you have to try to stay ahead of this to avoid, down the road, a likelihood of a possible stress fracture developing in the back, which has happened before with a number of quarterbacks, Tony Romo, Carson Wentz. There's been a number of quarterbacks that have, had that happen over time. But that's the one thing that I would be a little concerned about with Matt Stafford. But it seems like, they're trying to do everything under the sun to keep him close to 100%. But it's going to be something that lingers for a while, like you said.
And they just signed Kyron Williams to a 3-year contract, so probably more running action out there. And the other couple of Green Bay QB and the former Green Bay QB have some injuries. Green Bay, Jordan Love had a thumb surgery. Looks like he's going to be ready for week 1. Is there something his ADP is going to fall, or do you think it's going to? But again, it's on his left hand, so I don't think it's going to be a major issue there, right?
Yeah, if this was his right thumb, this would be a huge, huge, huge concern. But it's the left thumb, you're just worried about his grip strength at this point, being able to really grip and maintain the ball effectively. I mean, Jordan Love's always kind of had a tendency for turnovers. Hopefully, this his grip strength can get back to 100% as fast as possible. I'm not concerned at this point yet that he's going to miss any game time or anything like that. But it's something to monitor as we move forward because he's another one, throughout his career, he's had, these injuries are starting to stack up for him.
What about Aaron Rodgers? Looks like he had a small tweak in his calf, right calf. That's where he had his big injury a couple of years back. Something to be concerned, or just monitor and move on?
That one's a tough one. I would say slightly concerned. I mean, at the end of the day, he's what, 41 years old. So I mean, he's not a spring chicken anymore. It's one of those things where these soft tissue injuries, especially during training camp, preseason, in the beginning parts of the season before, it's going to take his body a lot longer to kind of get tuned up into playing shape. So it's something that, over the next week or two, if he's not back practicing without limitations, that should be something to be concerned about. But right now, hey, he's just 41 years old. Expect his body to not be, 100% at this point.
Yep. Let's run through some wide receivers. No major issues there on the wide receiver side. Rondale Moore, unfortunate back-to-back season-ending injuries, so that's really unfortunate right there. And then a couple of other injuries. Green Bay Packer wide receivers. Jaden Reed's having some foot injury. Looks like he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. Romeo Dobbs is dealing with a back injury. I don't know. It looks like Matthew Golden's stock keeps going up and up. And then the other couple of small ones, Malik Nabers had like a lingering toe injury. I think off season he had some treatment on his toe. That seems okay. And Darnell Mooney came out with a shoulder injury. Looks like he's going to miss some time, which means more time for Drake London and Kyle Pitts. So anything which our fans need to know in terms of drafting of these? I think Jaden Reed's dropping down. I don't see him getting picked up in his current ADP.
Yeah, it's hard because again, the Packers, I mean, they're a team that likes to run the ball. You have Josh Jacobs, so why wouldn't you tote the rock as much as possible with a powerful running back like him? But now that Jaden Reed is suffering from that foot sprain, like you mentioned, his stock is going down. Romeo Dobbs, with that potential back injury, yesterday had to leave practice. So now their top 4 out of 5 wide receivers are on the shelf. I mean, Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs. You also have Dontavian Wicks with a calf injury, and then Christian Watson had that ACL injury. So, like you said, stock up definitely for Matthew Golden. Then right now, their wide receiver 2 by default is Mecole Hardman.
Let's
You're not really,
go.
yeah, you're not going to really take him in fantasy, maybe for like a week 1 or 2 if you're really decimated by injuries. But that's pretty much it for the Packers. Rondale Moore, that's a shame. One traumatic knee injury, and then first play happens the other knee. He was in line for potentially more volume too, because Jordan Addison is suspended the first 3 games of the season behind Justin Jefferson as wide receiver 2. So right now it looks like wide receiver 2 in Minnesota right now is potentially Jalen Naylor. Again, probably not a guy you're going to draft unless it's like late round flyer, first, second, last round of the draft. You're saying, hey, why not? I'll pick him up. Malik Nabers, lingering toe injury, he hasn't been practicing. It's not going to significantly affect his draft stock. I wouldn't say if you're not comfortable, drafting him round 1, he might slide to round 2. But that's pretty much it that I see in my book. And then Darnell Mooney, He had a strong year last year, almost had 1,000 yards receiving, shoulder injury week to week. We haven't really gotten much clarity based on it yet. I wouldn't say it's going to affect his draft stock too much just yet. He's more like a mid to late round target anyway. But I mean, Drake London and Bijan Robinson are the guys that you really want on that team anyway.
Yep. And Vikings, I think wide receiver two is going to be DJ Hawkinson out there, depending on how he's progressing from his injury. Looks like he's back at practice, so I think he's going to have a good season out there. What are your thoughts on our running backs? Nothing crazy. Let's run through some running backs and jump on to a couple of our main topics with offensive line and the 49ers.
Yeah, so a couple of the running backs that dealt with some injuries this past week. Tyjae Spears, the kind of RB2 slash receiving back out there in Tennessee. He suffered a high ankle sprain. He's going to miss the rest of the preseason. Potentially, hopefully back for a week one return, but we've seen time and time again throughout, our time covering injuries that these high ankle sprains, especially with running backs, really zaps their explosiveness. I mean, it's one of the most important things to be able to kind of plant, cut, and explode out of that cut. And the fact that these lingering high ankles, really zap that explosiveness. So if anything, it's stock up more for Tony Pollard at this point, especially with a rookie quarterback. They're going to try to ease Cam Ward's workload early on. Moving on, Tampa Bay, Rashad White suffered a groin injury. They're saying he's day to day, but again, he's another one that has had, quad injuries, some hamstrings, just a lot of soft tissue injuries over time. And they have a pretty capable backup running back in Sean Tucker. So,
He's a
Bucky,
bullet.
yeah,
He's a bullet out there.
yeah, and he's big, right? I mean, so you got the guy, Bucky Irving, unquestionable RB1, took the reins in that job. As you know, you're kind of down in Tampa. But now Sean Tucker, I mean, I think they're going to give him more volume this year too. So I could see Rashad White kind of fading into the background in that offense. Potentially. I still think he's going to get some
Yeah.
receiving work, but he's not going to get a ton of volume. Staying in the Sunshine State with Alexander Madison, the Miami Dolphins. Yeah, he had a bad neck injury. Luckily, he had full range of motion and strength. So you're thinking no neurological signs, like no spinal cord injury or anything like that. But he's going to be out for the rest of the season. So, who really takes the reins behind Devon Achane? Jalen Wright, they got a few other guys down there in Miami.
Ollie
So,
Gordon had a good preseason game, so that's going to
yeah.
be interesting out there. Yep.
Yep. Yep. And then lastly, we got Kenneth Walker, another guy that have had a plethora of injuries throughout his career so far. Is dealing with like an ankle foot injury. We don't really know much about it yet, but I think we mentioned last week that if anything, if you're going to take a guy like Kenneth Walker, please, please, please reach and take his handcuff, Zach Charbonnet, to really cover your own butt.
Yep. And a couple of tight end injuries. Isaiah Likely and Dalton Kincaid still suffering with their own injuries. No major updates there. Mason Taylor, I think, had a high ankle injury. Looks like it's like a mild grade one, looks like. But similar to what Dave said, we'll see how that goes, like similar to Tyjae Spears, but I don't think it's going to affect Mason Taylor as much as Tyjae Spears. So that's going to be interesting for the Jets. Right now, they have Garrett Wilson and a really good running game. So it's going to be interesting at the Jets. Dave, typically we don't talk about offensive line, but this past week there were a couple of big news on the offensive line, and I feel it's going to have major fantasy impact, especially for your Eagles. Landon Dickerson and Kenyon Green both had what Landon Dickerson had a minor meniscus procedure done. He's week to week. Kenyon Green had a shoulder injury, and Mekhi Becton's gone. So three new offensive linemen, or at least banked up offensive line. I truly feel it's going to affect their tush push a lot. So Jalen Hurts on the goal line and Saquon Barkley's production. So it seems something's off at the Eagles training camp. What do you think?
Yeah, so this was actually a pretty big. I mean, honestly, I think the story of the week was the offensive line injuries. We didn't even mention that Rashawn Slater, tore his patellar tendon for
Yep.
the Chargers. That's a huge loss for them,
Yep.
and that's a tough injury to come back from, even more difficult than an ACL injury.
Yep.
So that's going to be a long term, 9 to 12 month injury. Mekhi Becton, he's dealing with his own injury also in LA, former Eagles player. But the collective sigh of relief that you may have heard the other day was all of Philadelphia saying, "Oh my God, thank goodness, Landon Dickerson, it was just a meniscus." There were reports swirling around that it could have been a potential serious knee injury, ACL, could have been an Achilles injury with the mechanism of how it occurred. The meniscus is really the best case scenario. So they said it was a mild meniscus injury. He could potentially be back for week one. That tells me it's going to be a meniscectomy. So they're just going in and scoping the knee or just taking or trimming the torn part out. Typical recovery timeline could be anywhere from 4 weeks on the shorter time frame to potentially 8 weeks on the longer timeline. Landon Dickerson has had a number of knee injuries throughout his time in college. While he was at Florida State and
Yep.
Alabama, if you go and look at his history, and like you mentioned, I think I forget what the stat is, but like there's some crazy number that like I want to say it's like 70% of the time the tush push goes right under the left guard. I mean,
Yep.
Landon Dickerson's a mauler, so the fact that he is out for, potentially a couple games in the regular season is big news. Don't really think it significantly affects like Jalen Hurts or Saquon Barkley's stock just because the offense is still, a well-oiled machine. But the backup, Kenyon Green, that we got him from Houston with the CJ Gardner-Johnson trade, you're thinking, okay, he's going to step up. No, he's dealing with a shoulder injury. So now I think they're plugging in Brett Toth, the
Oh
seven-year
my.
veteran. Yeah,
Weird.
so he's next man up, and Jeff Stoutland, the great offensive line coach that I trust. But if this goes into week one, week two, that's something to be concerned about, especially they have a tough slate of games early on. And, Will Clapp, the Saints center, placed on IR.
Yep.
Just a rough week for offensive linemen. And like you said, we need to talk about that more because the fallout is really significant. It's not just like, okay, there's great skill players, but they need to be protected with a strong
Yep.
offensive line.
Yeah, big deal. I think Tyler Shuck's going to have a tough time there. Alvin Kamara is going to get affected a little bit. But I think Eagles, like you said, are a well-oiled machine. So let's see what happens there. One of our viewers asked about CMC last week. And instead of just talking about CMC, I wanted to bring up the whole 49ers team. Their offensive weapons, like every year, it's like right now, what Ayuk's injured, every wide receiver is injured. Like Jennings has something. Um, Ricky Pearsall has something. Jacob Coving has like everyone's injured. Running back, CMC the healthiest right now, but the history shows how like it's just terrible. And I don't know what's happening at the 49ers camp. Every year the injury keeps mounting for them. And I don't know if it's like a training issue or something to do with it. It seems so odd that every running back they sign gets injured, some way, shape, or the form. Every wide receiver gets injured.
Yeah, and that's something that again, like we're just going to speculate, but I feel like it has to have something to do with their training regimen or something because you see teams go through this periodically. Like I know my Eagles at the end of like, right before 2020, they had a few years, same thing. A lot of guys with soft tissue injuries, and you just were like, man, we cannot catch a break. Well, it ended up being that their practice schedule got totally revamped to have more like lighter practices and incorporate more walkthroughs. But the training program as well. I mean, they brought in a whole new training staff. You're hoping that the training staff is really incorporating a lot of flexibility in addition to strengthening, exercises and routines, and also, adequate warm-ups and cool downs. I'm sure they're doing that, but they could always try to tweak their program a little bit because, like you said, every year this happens, especially, and it seems like San Fran is the new team where this is happening. Guys are dropping down like flies. Um, like you said, Jawan Jennings has been dealing with a lingering calf injury. Brandon Ayuk, he had that unhappy triad, ACL, MCL, and meniscus injury. Kyle Shanahan said this week that they're hopeful that he can come back week 6. CMC, like you said, he's healthy right now, so that's great as drafts approach. But the thing is, okay, how much do you want to gamble with history? Last year it was the frustration. He was the consensus number one, was dealing with bilateral
Yep.
both legs, Achilles tendonitis. That's something not to just brush away. That's a pretty significant injury. So you hope that, he looked pretty strong towards the end of last year. Let's hope that, a full off season of, training can have CMC fully healthy. Still risky, I would say, to draft him. If you're going to draft him, you're probably going to have a little knot in your stomach just because you're going to cross your fingers, say, I hope he's going to be healthy. But on the other side, the 49ers schedule, when you look at it, very favorable because they came in last place last year or second to last place, I forget, but they have a very favorable schedule. So their offense should put up points, assuming everyone is healthy, CMC included. So if you're picking back end of, round one, you're not thrilled with the other options, cross your fingers, say a prayer, hope that CMC can make it through healthy.
Yep. And again, all injuries can be solved with smelling salts, I feel like. So it's going to be interesting. NFL bans smelling salts, so we have to touch upon it a little bit. But they changed the rule a little bit so the players can bring their own. NFL just doesn't want to provide. So they want to stay away from liability. And studies apparently show that it masks concussion symptoms. So it's going to be interesting how NFL is going to deal with it and how the players are going to deal with it because players are so used to it all the time, and it's going to be interesting there. So that's pretty much it for major injuries this week. But again, Dave, any final thoughts going into week two? Again, last week your message was don't overreact. I think I second that. I think we continue not overreacting, and we'll probably cover whatever fantasy impact injuries out on the show.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, just continue not to overreact, like we just mentioned. And, week two, this is going to be likely the last game where the starters are playing, if at all. So if your starters can make it through this week relatively unscathed, of course, there is a likelihood that they may get injured in a practice or something like that. But now, is the time after week two where teams start to kind of wind it back with their offensive and defensive starters. And it's really those guys on the roster bubble that are making, headway here. So just continue to follow us and make sure that that all your favorite players are being targeted and that they're making it through this week healthy. That's the biggest thing.
Yep. And we'll be back next Wednesday. Do check our injuryexperts.com and draft guide. And let us know in the comments if you need any other injuries. Like last week, somebody asked for CMC. We covered it. So we're happy to do a deep dive. So please let us know. And we'll see you guys next week. Have a wonderful weekend, week two preseason football. Have fun, everyone.